Our story begins in County Monaghan. Near the North Ireland border, close to the city of Clones, is a place known as Grennan's Cross. There lived John Keenan and his wife Anne. They were married in 1843 and they had 11 children. This is the earliest photograph of that family. Francis is seen in the back row. He was the third child and the firstborn son. In 1867, he married Anne McCann in Rosalie, Northern Ireland. They were 21 when they married, and they traveled to America on their honeymoon. In 1875, they settled in Kansas. 3 years ago, the Larry Keenan family traveled to Grennan's Cross in an effort to find the Keenan homestead. Their journey began with a knock on the door of Jimmy McCarville. He once owned the property but sold it. He then directed us to a man named Packy. And what Packy told us, we will never forget.
Yeah, and Keenan's, the old pass here, they used to call it Keenan's Pass, or they called it another Askins Pass. It's just in the road here. You saw it, did you?
Up here? You know where it used to be.
Did somebody told you where the old pass used to come out? The pass turned up down the top of our fields here.
I see.
They're right away into the house.
It must have been
and that's the way they got.
That's the way That's the way they come out. Go somewhere.
Right.
They had them up the top of the hill here, just along the back.
Road, a little yes, small.
And there's some of the old past bits of there left yet, and some of them is along our fields here at the top. And there's some of the old past there yet.
Well, you can check them right in.
But,
well, were the Keenans, were they tenants? Did they have,
No, they owned land.
They owned land?
They had about 10 or 12 acres of land.
10 or 12 acres?
And these...
And that was a lot maybe back then.
That was families had, you see, they made 5 or 6 sons and nobody went out to work or went away anywhere, and the land was divided up and they got married, and the land was, that's the way, the small pieces of land. You had to live on 10 acres of land.
I saw Luke Keenan was buried over in Rosalie at the cemetery.
Is that right?
Packy led us into a field adjacent to his home, to the spot of the original Keenan homestead. There were a collection of rocks and stones there, and it was clear this was home.
Last time I was here from Bath, there was a little roll up there.
Francis and Mary Ann settled in Stafford County. There they had 8 children. This photograph depicts 6 of them. Patrick, P.L. in the back row. Johnny, to his left, lived with Patrick his entire life and never married. Maggie Keller married and lived virtually across the road from the home place. In this early photograph, taken approximately 1915, shows Francis Keenan and his siblings vacationing in Manitou Falls, Colorado. This photograph dates back to 1903 and depicts Grandpa Francis Keenan at his wife's graveyard in St. Francis Xavier Cemetery. Notice the buggy in the background. Growing up Catholic in Stafford County necessarily includes a discussion of the role of St. Francis Xavier Catholic Church and School. That parish, still active today, was of great importance to the Keenan families in the late 1800s and early 1900s. All of the Keenan siblings tell stories of attending church there and in later years school there. To the Keenans, the parish priests were part of the family. They spent time with them and they adopted them, especially those that were Irish. Father Ty remembers.
My memory, if it's correct, tells me that I came to Seward about May of, or June of 1961. I was greeted warmly by a group of people who were proud of their Irish heritage and were very, very happy to have a native-born priest come. I was at the ripe old age of 30 and was very inexperienced, but I had been in the parish by myself for a year and a half and would have loved to have stayed there, so I wasn't overly thrilled when the bishop asked me to come to Seward because I didn't know where it was. But I moved all my stuff down and things began to improve immediately, if not even sooner, because of the warm welcome that I received from those people. And when I was there about a week, I was invited down to the local pool hall, and the boys were all having a good time, having a nipping, as they called it, and playing pool, and asked me if I played pool, and I said no. I said, don't worry, as long as you don't drink, you'll be able to beat all of those in about an hour and a half. And it was fun watching them and so on. And I remember I had a built-in barber in Keenan. He said, don't ever worry about going to the barber shop. I'll take care of you there. And little things like that made life very enjoyable to start with. The school was a problem because we didn't have much money, and I remember very early on we had a fundraiser where people donated all kinds of things to the church, and old Pat Senior came in, Pat Keenan Senior, and was the auctioneer, and everything was going along smoothly when he was above on the stand and jumped off and shouted at the top of his voice, call the police, call the police. And I had no idea what was happening, and he said, somebody is trying to steal that. And when we settled back down, and we did raise some money, I forgot, not very much, probably a couple of $1,000, but that was a godsend back in the 60s when you had a small school.
But at the turn of the century, being Catholic was unpopular with some groups, including the Ku Klux Klan, which actually had a presence in central Kansas. Louise remembers.
Yes, I was just a small child when the Ku Klux Klan was going strong. And of course, in every neighborhood there was a leader. School board was meeting to settle the business of the year and hire the teacher. And my dad was on the school board, and I was teaching there, currently teaching there. Well, Father Butler drove in to ask Dad if he knew where he could find some strawberry plants. And in the meantime, the high mogul of the Ku Klux Klan drove by and saw Father Butler talking to Dad right before the school meeting, and he went up and told my board members, who had a telephone call the other one, and when they came down to meet, and they came to the point where they were to hire a teacher, they said, now Louise is a very good teacher, and we will recommend her, but we will not hire her. And Dad knew why. So he said, here's my resignation. So I got no school.
Where would they meet?
Yeah, when I was a kid, I don't know that I personally experienced this, but I heard about the Ku Klux Klan in that area because my dad was very adamant that he was going to wipe them all out. I do remember being told, and I know it's true, that the mailman was a member of the Klan. And so the boys, Paul and Bub and probably Ori, took this 2x4 and they drove big nails in it. And went out the mailbox and buried it in the sand. And the mailman came by and ended up with 4 flat tires down the road about a quarter of a mile. But it carried over. I remember when I was in high school, the early years, some girls couldn't date me because I was a Catholic. But that finally wore off and we became very well accepted. But the Klan finally kind of drifted away because there ended up being a lot more Catholics than Klanners.
Farming in central Kansas at the turn of the century posed lots of challenges. The 1930s were known as the Dirty 30s, in which the Dust Bowl ravished crops and farming communities throughout the Midwest. There were other challenges to the Keenans, and Louise describes two of them here.
How did you deal with that?
Well, of course, the Army were invasion, that took everything.
How old were you at that time?
I was about 8.
Describe what was that like?
Well, they came as an army, and I'd have to look up see what the moth was that they came from. But they were everywhere, and they were solid. That's why they call them army. They took everything as they went, crops, garden, everything. And even across the road at Keller's, I could smell our onion patch when they were going through it. Just took everything to the ground.
So what did the farmers do after that? They had nothing.
I really can't tell you what they did. We were lucky because Dad had his options.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the only way we made it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What about the Dust Bowl?
Well, in the Dust Bowl, it got so bad that if you wanted to open a window, you'd have to hang a wet dish towel over the window, you know. And I told you about Bub. His fiancée was dying in Colorado from dust pneumonia. And I had a new car, and I told him he could drive it. He drove out in the night, and she died from dust pneumonia.
At the age of 19, Mary Teresa Hall married Patrick Keenan. He was 21 at the time. They set up housekeeping on the hill 3/4 of a mile north and 1/2 mile east of the home place. It was there that Paul was born. They later moved to the home place and lived in the old house until the present was completed. Mary Teresa Hall was German, and her parents spoke German in their home.
My mother was teaching us to speak German, and the First World War came on, and there was a lot of feeling about being pro-German, and bad feeling. And so Dad had a mother to stop teaching us German for fear that they would think we were pro-German. So Paul and I didn't get to learn German, but our mother spoke it fluently.
And how would she speak to her mom? Would she talk to her?
We talked to her on telephone, which was a community line. She talked to her in German. Nobody knew what they were talking about.
In the annals of Keenan history, no event was more significant than the death of Mother Mary. While her passing impacted everyone, it was the younger siblings most profoundly affected, with Pat, age 9, Larry, 14, and Gloria, 17. Larry Keenan talks about it.
My mother, Mary, was a very saintly woman. She went to Mass frequently. I remember when I was probably 10 years old, and I'd drive to Mass and be in the wintertime, and I was so short I had to look through the steering wheel instead of over, because she didn't drive. But you know, I was 13 when she died, and she was sick for probably, well, at least a year. And I remember that she was at home, and she'd lay on the couch during the daytime. Of course, my sisters were around. I didn't know her condition was terminal. I suppose my dad and siblings knew it. But I remember when she died, she was at St. Louis Hospital. All the kids were there, everyone. Worry was in the Army, and he came home. That was June, I think, 19th or 21st, 1943. before he came home, Bob was home. He was in the Navy, and everybody was there in the hospital room. And Father Strecker, who later became Archbishop Strecker, was there. And he, in later years, he told me personally that he never forgot that. Because all the family was there, and she had such a peaceful death. But she was quite a woman. She was very good. She was 55 when she died.
How did you handle your emotions with your mom passing away?
I hid them. I hid them. There were so many people around. I didn't want them to see me cry. So I would go to my room, and there was nothing there. I couldn't. I told myself I wouldn't, and I couldn't. And then later, it came out. I had a doctor tell me, tears are healing. When you want to cry, cry, because that is healing for the body and the soul. And I wish I'd known that then. It would have saved me a lot of trouble. I had, after a tonsillectomy, what they call, and an appendectomy in the same 2 weeks. They called then a nervous breakdown. And when I could not keep any food down. So they would give me some kind of a sedative. When I'd wake up, they'd give me another one. And Uncle Bob heard about it. He was in the Navy, and he came back, and he came into that hospital, and he demanded that they let him take me somewhere that I would get some help. And he did. He did. I got the help I needed. They had kept me in bed for 3 weeks. I couldn't get out of bed. The first day I was it was the Hertz clinic. The first day they said, okay, get out of bed, it's time for your shower. I said, what? Yeah, yes. And from then on, it was recovery.
On the day of Mother Mary's funeral, Pat Jr. fell from a tree and broke his arm, as reflected in this early video. Patrick's remarriage within a year after Mary's death was initially very unpopular. Pat Jr. described what effect it had on his younger days on the farm.
Yeah, we go reminisce, go back when my mother died and my dad got married. It wasn't received too well by the family. My older brothers and sisters, and as I said, I was about 12, and they could come to the farm Christmas. And always we had everybody would go home on Christmas, and
Okay.
Anyway, they quit coming out, and I couldn't figure it out. And then so I said, well, they're not happy with Dad. So it was kind of something I wasn't on anything about it, and just very well to understand that those things happen, and everything has a way of working its way out. And finally, one day, I guess they had the Holy Spirit came upon them, and they all decided to come to the farm, and they started coming out, and Bub and Ori, and they all converged on the farm, and we were back to old times again, eating.
On July 27, 1944, Popo married Mabel Folkerts. She was widowed with 5 children. Following their marriage, Popo and Mabel had 2 children, Terry and Denny. Of the 12 children of Keenan, it is clear that there was always something quite special about Paul and Louise. They were, of course, the oldest of the children, with Paul having been born in 1908 and Louise 2 years later. But it was more than simply a function of their age. They were leaders and, in some respects, second parents to the younger siblings in the Keenan family.
back when I was a kid living at home, it seems to me, my best recollection is that we had kind of the before Bobs and the after Bobs. Bob and after, and Bob and before. Paul and Louise were the oldest, of course, and although Paul was older, she and Paul went to high school at Great Bend, Kansas, and they lived with the Bridens, a family here in Great Bend, in their home. They come home on weekends, and as a consequence, Paul and Louise were co-valedictorians of the senior class graduating from Great Bend High School. So they're both very talented. Louise went on to get her teaching certificate and taught school for many years, during the Depression, I might add, and she was one of the few people in our community able to buy a new car every so often. A new 1935 Plymouth was priced at $495 FOB Detroit. Well, they had some transportation charges on that, but she always had a fine car, and so she was kind of the provider. You would inquire, and her car might be made available. I wasn't old enough to drive in those days, but I recall that Louise was trying to encourage Sister June to go to high school, and June was wavering. She didn't want to go, and so she said, "June, if I make my car available to you," it was a new Plymouth, "would you go to Radium High School so that you need to get a high school education?" She says, "Yes, I'll do that." Louise made that.
Louise taught for, I think, something like 9 years, and she had money. I mean, when she would put her purses away for the season, she would put money in each one of them. And then when she'd get them out, everybody would get a treat of some kind. I remember something about Louise when she was teaching. One of her first teaching positions was at Eden Valley School. And she had Bob and I sing a duet, a new song. It was Who's Afraid of the Big Bad Wolf? And it wasn't a Christmas, program. But we were thrilled. We really were. But after she quit teaching, I don't know what the circumstances were, but she was going to join the convent. And I remember seeing my mother over washing clothes, scrubbing clothes over a washboard. And the tears were adding to the water in the washboard. I said, what is wrong? And she said, "Oh, I'm so happy. I'm so happy. Your sister is going to go to the convent." And Louise, I heard her piece of it, and she said, "I have ironed my last shirt, 13 shirts this week, and I'm not going to iron another shirt. I am leaving." Well, she got Larry and I a new tricycle, and we were just really happy. I mean, we couldn't be sad about her leaving because she had gotten those for us. Well, she got to the convent, and they put her in the laundry, and she didn't last.
The home place has been in the Keenan family for over 100 years. In the 1920s and 30s, anywhere from 8 to 11 Keenan family members lived there. Across the road to the west lived Maggie Keller, Popo's sister. Living in a home with this size with so many relatives is something June Klepper describes.
If you could give us some sense for what it was like living in the house, and who was in what rooms, and what was that like?
You mean out the farm? Down the farm? Well, Paul, the oldest boy, he kind of had I don't know what I want to say, pet. He was a pet. And he had his private room, the west room there in the big house, alone. And of course, Louise, Sylvia, and I had the south room, which we had a bed and a cot. And in the west, well, of course, Paul had that. And in the north room was Bub and Ori. Of course, the young ones weren't there then. And then in the east room, my dad's brother, Uncle Johnny, Keenan, he was pet. He had the room all to himself. And here's a cute thing, and we had lace curtains in there. And whenever it'd get hot, he'd raise those windows, and we'd go up there to make his bed, and he'd have those lace curtains tied in knots all over. And that wasn't really probably what you wanted. And but my mother cooked for him and worked for him all those years till he died, my dad's brother. And just once in a while, at Christmas time, he gave her a gift of some money. And that, you know what I mean, she really was a hard-working woman and raised 10 children. Can you imagine? And then my dad's brother there living with us yet.
We just had a lot of fun when we were kids. You know, I don't think anyone ever sat around in their life and worried about what they were going to do, because we could just kick up something to do, and the way we'd go, you know. We stole a few watermelons and whatever, you know. We rode horses. We got a little bit older, and we rode horses, and we used to go camp out at night and bring our horses and saddles and pretend we were cowboys. And I tell you, know, the cowboys always slept under a saddle. I tried that. I couldn't sleep on a saddle with my head on a saddle, you know. But we had a lot of fun. We tried to cook birds that we'd shot, and they weren't very good. But all of it was fun. I mean, we really had a bowl of cherries as far as fun goes. I don't think we ever had a
And we were kids on the farm. In addition to walking across the field and meeting on horses and things like that. Marvin Keller, I know, in his commentary, talked about when we go camping out with the horses. They were, 21 Highway at that time was gravel. And we would take our horses or bikes, wherever we had, and we'd go down to the Huffman place, John Huffman's, because he had a swimming pool, believe it or not, which was built for agricultural purposes and not really for entertainment. And he also had a wine cellar. So we'd go down and maybe have a little bit of wine and swim. And one Sunday we got bored, and so we found an old purse, an old colorful purse at the Huffman farm. And we got some string, and we went down and got in a covert under the road in front of the Huffman place, put this bright purse in the middle of the road, and then covered up the string with gravel, and then we got in the covert. Well, that was during the war, and you could only drive 35 miles an hour. That was the limit. When you drive 35, why, you see a person in the road, it's easy to stop, and pick it up. It's easy to identify. Well, car after car would pull up and screech to a halt, would slide on the gravel, and get out, and just before they grabbed the purse, we pulled the string. And they'd take off very embarrassed. We did that time after time, and day after day. It was fun.
What contacts did you have with the brothers? What brothers lived in town there? You said
Ori lived in town, and Russell, Bob, lived across the street, and his two boys, John and Mick, lived across the street. And Ori's kids were fairly small. The older ones had moved away, I understand, but Mark, the youngest, was still there, and he was an older boy, and still thinks fondly of those occasions. He used to get up and come to serve my mass for me. When he was home for Dad's funeral, he mentioned to me that Ori always considered me his best friend in life, and would I please come make sure that I went to the graveside to see him his last farewell, and which I did. And
funniest thing I think ever happened. I said, Bub bought a new stove, and it had an unbreakable window. That's one of the new ones with the window. And he said the salesman took the burner off and hid it like that. And after mass, we'd usually go to Bub's Oars. So he was showing us a new stove and hauled that back and kicked it with his foot and put a hole right through it. And Rita about killed him. I mean, she about killed him.
Keenan was a renowned auctioneer, and his introduction to that calling occurred at a very young age when he and his father Francis were at a farm auction. There, the auctioneer was drunk, and they asked Pat if he would cry the sale. That day, his life would change forever, as he became a full-time auctioneer, a business that was later carried on by his son Pat. Popo's auctioneering business flourished, and at various times he employed sons, daughters, and in-laws. Gloria remembers. What do you remember about Popo's auctions? Do you have any distinct memories of his auctioneering?
He had 3 sales a week. One was in Great Bend, one was in St. John, one was in Larned. But my most vivid memory of an auction was when I took a girlfriend with me to an auction. And all of a sudden, I realized, and I was a teenager, I realized that he was auctioning us off. He had centered in on us, and then he said, this is my daughter and her friend. But the whole crowd was starting to bid on what item he was auctioning. But he was a wonderful dad. He was so good to us.
Ori Keenan was drafted by the County Draft Board to serve in the U.S. Army shortly after the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor in December 1941. At that time, he and Rita had twin babies, Jerry and Mary, at home. Both were less than 1 year old. In this early video, it shows him in Kansas City, where he trained to be a radio technician. Following his training, he served in North Africa and later India. The sum total of his military service was almost 4 years. brother Robert also served in World War II. In his junior year at Fort Hays State, he signed up to serve with the Navy. In the spring of 1943, Bob got his orders. He was assigned to Norfolk, Virginia, and then midshipman school at Northwestern University in Chicago.
One of the better things that I got to do with my brothers, Bob, Pat, Ori, and Bob Russell, was that we'd take these annual trips to Colorado fishing. They came about because Bob had lots of friends. He was a very gregarious guy. And he had this friend from London named Jim Fulton. Jim would go to, when he was young, go to Colorado and fly fish in the Keenan River. And he liked it so well that finally he became a professional fly fisherman. And he built these cabins, I think 3 or 4 cabins along the Keenan, near a little town called Antonita, Colorado. It's up in, you go through Walsenburg and go up to the San Luis Valley and then you turn south. It's close to the New Mexico border. But in any event, we'd go and stay a week, and always in September. And the attendees at these events would change, where we go sometimes, but I think always Bob and I went. One time my brother-in-law Victor Gehring from Hutchinson, when he was a lawyer there, he was Mona's brother. He killed in a car accident in 1974, but Vic was a lot of fun. He laughed easy and he drank easy. But we'd go up and we'd fish, and Bob were very good fly fishing persons. The rest of us sort of were learning. We did this about 5 years, I suppose, or maybe 6, and had a lot of fun. When you see the pictures of us hiking over this mountain were taken when we were going from the Keenan River up to Durango to see Marvin Keller. We went up there once and went fishing with him in one of the lakes where he had access. But those are good years.